Oh man, I gotta tell you something. I don't know what a generation gamma is, really. To me, in my era, you don't even exist yet. You have yet to exist. I don't know what the problem was, but I'm assuming your generation is the last generation, hopefully, of generational labeling. Now, labeling a generation has kind of always existed. Like, there was always the young and the old, as long as there was young and old. But that's not what I mean. Nostalgia is a part of it. Nostalgia is kind of a problem. But that's not what this video is. Generational labeling, or ageism as it's often more commonly called in my era, basically what it means is because you see somebody as younger or older, you see them as like a different generation or like a different group, you know? Like how somebody from a different nation would see somebody from a different nation to an extent, or an ethnic group, or a religion, or a political worldview. Basically, they're making it like another barrier. And Generation Gamma, for whatever reason, came into existence. And you might have your era's equivalent to Generation Gamma can't read, or Generation Gamma is the stupidest, worst generation to exist. It's worse than Generation Z and Alpha and Beta. What's next? Generation Omega? I don't know. But this whole generational thing, if you want a quick history lesson, basically a long time ago, people kind of had that idea going around, spitting around, but it didn't really get popular until World War I, and especially during the post-World War I era, and during this time period. People like to say it's a European war, but not really. Not really per se. If you're talking like most of the war part, then yeah. But if you're talking the worldwide effects, then no. That's why it's literally called a world war. Okay? World War II is the bigger boy. It's the more famous one. That was the war that really, for the first time, determined if USA was going to be a major world power. And even then, it was mostly Europe that dominated, and even into the 21st century for most of it. And I want to say up until about 2020 or so, it was still mostly just Europe and certain parts of Asia. But now, for the first time, I want to say my nation has really, gotten its first golden age for the first time. Like, true golden age, internationally speaking. What does this have to do with anything? Well, after World War II, and during World War II, I believe you could say, you had the silent generation, and that was that era. Then you had the boomers, from the ending of World War II until about, I want to say, the mid to late 60s. And then you had the Generation X, which is considered the lost generation. But it's not really that lost. It was just like a weird time. They were born, raised, and grew up in the height of, well, kind of a collective way of living. But basically, they grew up from an era of like there was a few, like a generation or so that were born and raised into monoculture, pop culture, and then they were kind of born into it, and then millennials, for the most part, if you're talking about the older half, were really born into it, and I guess the younger half too. And then Generation X was the think like 1980s, 1990s, Okay? To be more specific, if I were to put it on a very, like, specific year, I would say think, what's the best year for this example? I would say 1993. I don't know why, but I'm gonna go for a random year like that. Anyway, then you had the 2000s and 2010s. That was mostly would eventually be the millennials and the Generation Z that sort of started to dominate. But again, it was mostly Generation X and millennials that dominated those two eras. And Generation Z didn't really have its first era as a generation to really dominate until the 2020s. But it's temporary. It's temporary, like every other generation before them. But again, this is generational labeling. It didn't always exist, okay? It wasn't around for like thousands of years, you know? Yes, it is wrapped in some form of traditionalism, but traditionalism doesn't necessarily mean it's traditional or good for you, and not everything that is traditional is good, you know, even if you are a traditionalist. And what does this all have to do with Generation Gamma? You know, I'm trying to get to my point here, but it's kind of hard to explain when your generation, at least time of recording, literally doesn't exist yet. But I don't know what was the problem with Generation Gamma. They just were. You know, they weren't what was, what could have been, what couldn't have not been. You know, what won't happen, what will happen, what you thought didn't happen, what you thought would have happened, what you thought would have not happened. I don't know, I keep saying things. Words come out. In fact, I think some of you have already been looking in the comments section from the beginning. I think some of you were already scrolling and looking for other videos to watch. Because how fucking dare you, at least in your head or something, watch a video? I don't know. Don't go into the whole, oh, but being cringe is free culture. Because you'll get stuck into the whole nostalgia thing, and you'll lose your mind. And I mean that very literally, okay? Because there are limits to nostalgia. Even nostalgics admit that. You know, because it's like, you can only go so far into the past. You can only deny, you know, modernity, as my era likes to call it. The future. But I would say, conquer all the multiverses, you know? Because I would say, forget tradition. Tradition used to be modernity at one point. And what is right now modernity for a lot of things, not everything, but some things, might become tradition to certain people, you know? And there's rural, there's urban. Urban means like city, you know, people living in buildings, people living in like more like collective kind of thing. They're more living in like a whole bunch of people kind of stuff. Rural, on the other hand, means like you have to kind of rely on yourself out there. There's like your nearest neighbor is like it's like a small town away, you know? And that's assuming that's your closest neighbor, you know? That kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, it takes the length of a small town just to get to, you know, over there, to the local shop, to the local barber shop, or whatever the hell. You know what I mean? But again, what does this have to do with Generation Gamma? I don't know. I don't know what the problems of your era will be. I know it will have to do something with the internet to some extent because, well, you're watching this video, so duh. But, whatever technologies, especially in the next century, even if, their generation is no longer relevant anymore, at least in terms of, how should I say, age, and whatever happens in the centuries or thousands of years to come, long over this one or the next one, regardless of what happens, just remember, these people did make a mark on the world or the universe. However it may work, I don't know. I'm not, again, from your time. And a lot of things that I'm saying probably is not going to age well, okay? You don't need to care too much, but you don't need to care too little. I come from an era where most people want to either be the least or the most extreme of something. And even if it's like at the in-between of that, it's like the most in-between of in-betweens. Like the most, like right there, Like it's not, like it can't just be a something. It always has to be an absolute nothing or an absolute something. It's complicated, and it will change, and the interpretation will be different than how it is now. But, yeah, that's basically it. And I like to talk. And what people like to tend to forget or take for granted about language is every time you use it, you change it slightly. Every time you don't use it, it changes it slightly. Sometimes you might want to be the opposite of somebody's accent or somebody's accent more, but it's kind of like hacked their brains. It made everybody go all scroll, rather than, whatever they actually wanted to be. And personally, I believe in free will. I believe in individualism. Not like to an extreme extent, but like it can be, like you can let it, but it doesn't have to be. You can make it the most minimum you want, or the most maximum you want. I can't tell you what to do. Hell, you're the one who decided to watch this video, not me. I'm not you and you're not me. But how do you know you're not me, and how do I know you're not you? Whoever you might be, whoever is watching this in whatever time period or era it may be in, ages or eras. All I know is that it has to do with Generation Gamma. But this generation, I have hopes for them. Now, yes, there will be a lot of disappointments, a lot of historical fuck-ups along the way, but that happens in every age and every era, regardless of how good or how bad the generation is. We're in a historical time period where we don't just know what happens in a general sense, but we don't need the news to tell us, hey, it happened this way or that way. All you have to do is ask the people from the internet, since that's the thing we use in my time, hey, victim who made the recording and posted it onto YouTube, what do you think about this, that, digitally. Like, you don't have to actually go to that war, whatever it may be, whatever the problems it may be, a disease, problems they may cause for later generations, technology, money, TV shows, movies, video games, books, what else? Music, sports, politics, religion, sexualities. There are a lot of things you could go on. Food, fashion, etc. that word should be written in full, but for some reason it isn't. Speaking of written, there's not too many people who write. They're like, oh, the typewriter is back in my era. Time of recording. But I'm like, if you're so passionate about writing, why don't you just physically write the words, so you can know how to write them? And they're like, no. Typewriter is better because it's typewriter. Like, I could get, if you're trying to set, like, a strict message to somebody, or you're trying to make, like, an actual, like, strict-looking thing. But it's like, if you're just wanting to write just to write, I would say get a pencil and just write whatever you think you want to write. You can make your own language, or at least make a way where it makes sense to you. As long as you know how to read and write in it, I would say, there you go. There's your result. And again, like I said earlier, I really do have hope for later generations, especially afterward, what Generation Gamma did, what they started, what they were, what they are doing, and then what they're not doing, or whatever, or, it's all in the past now. I don't know. I can't predict every single fucking thing that's ever happened. Okay? Like, I'm one of those guys where, I don't really have a filter, per se. And I've been exploited for this. But, I tend to just, I say things and people don't like them. Or they do like them. Regardless, I just say things. I like to talk. I like to speak. I like to give an opinion. I'm kind of a judgmental person. Not exactly. I'm not trying to be narcissistic. But if you ask me, if you believe you can do the things you want to do, not just believe in it, but actually do those things, actually accomplish those things, or even if not, you at least tried, okay? You don't have to put it in the hardest work, or the smartest, or the wisest, or the weakest, or the this or thatest, but you have to put in something, whatever that one thing is for you. Whether it be religion, politics, sports, a specific hobby, learning another language or something. I don't know. I'm not you. I can't tell you what to do, what you can and can't do, and when you can and can't do it. Again, you're the one watching this video, not me. Not me. Okay? Time of recording, I lived in a time when USA was still a country. It still existed. Okay? By that I mean United States of America. And I talk in a very specific way of talking that, for some reason, I'm the only person who has my specific accent, at least natively. So I'm the last of my kind around, or maybe I am the first. I don't know. What do you think? Do you have any thoughts, ideas, questions, answers, facts, whatever? Did I say opinions? Or just things you want to talk about? I don't know. I'm not Generation Gamma. They're from not my time. My time is when I recorded this. Okay? You gotta understand. That I'm running out of things to say. Illiteracy was a problem in my time period. Um, Scientific illiteracy, political illiteracy, religious illiteracy. Um, like, it used to just kind of be a gray mush, but now the gray mush is turning into something nastier. It's turning into something more awful. And whatever the awful thing becomes, if it ever does become something in my lifetime, it completely depends upon what Generation Gamma will do afterward. Whatever this becomes, it completely depends upon whatever Generation Gamma does to it. You know, doesn't matter how good or how bad it is. It will come during their, age, assuming it's gonna come at the earliest. Okay? We're taking the most optimistic position. It isn't just gonna happen randomly in 10,000 years from now, But this gray lump is not exactly gray anymore. Let's just say, okay, it's starting to become colorless. Not even clear, just colorless. Absolute nothing. But when it does eventually come back into something, as they say, well, that just depends on who you are and how you'll interpret it. Whatever it comes back as. But that's not for me to decide. That's for you to decide. Because I am simply just the messenger. Okay? I am simply just the person who is recording this video. Okay? I am not, out and about here to tell you that you live in this specific place on this specific planet, whatever planet you live on. You live out there, in the Great Plains in the universe. You live in the known universe or something. Generation Gamma might be cooked, but even if they do a lot of bad things, they could be the saviors of this century. But they have to be careful because they're also the generation that will determine how the next century will turn out. So, yeah. And then whatever, the next century is, and then so on and so forth, and keeps going and going and going and going and going. Because people, they just act like history is just gonna one day just stop. Like, there's gonna be the ultimate Armageddon, or, a Ragnarok, a fucking end of time. But what if that day never comes? Or what if that day does come, and then all of this restarts all over again. Like it's just some big groundhog butt fuck. Like, I hate to get colorful with my words because people don't like, quote unquote, hate speech. But, niggers and niggas keep bickering and bockering about, but we're gonna be there when the end times come, when the final strike happens. We're gonna be the true, we're the Tok'ra of the Goa'uld, we're the good guys, they're the bad guys, everybody else, meaning not their group. Now, not everybody's like this, and there are mixed people. There are people in other groups of, this way, that way. There's no real good guy, there's no real bad guy, but there's no real good guy either, it's that kind of thing. Like, you can't really define evil because people can interpret it whatever you want away, and even if you could define it, you're just gonna get into some nasty debates, you know? And then same thing with good. It's like, how would you define good? You know, I guess it would depend on who you are, but like, how would you define good? Why would you define good that way? You know, that kind of stuff. And then why is there good? Why is there evil? Why is there evil? Why is there good? Why is there stuff in between? Why is there stuff not in between? Why is things this way? Why is it that way? Why is this particular corner this particular way? Why are we all here? The truth is, I don't know. But I don't think we really need to. Does it really matter? Should it matter? Could it matter? Does it have to matter? I don't know. Can't say. But yeah. Generation Gamma, or what was Generation Gamma, is just it's as far as I'm concerned, time of recording, you're just a name for a potential age, generation, whatever you want to call it, group of people. Okay, because it gets strange. It gets strange, it gets weird, it gets cringe, it gets nonchalant. It gets cool or uncool. But I got stuff I got to do. But if you are Generation Gamma or a later generation, or even if you're an earlier generation, let me know what you think about this video. I have things to attend to. So I shall see you later. So, good morning, good day, good evening, and good night. I am out of here. Bye.